fellas, we are now open to proposals. What y'all got?
I would like to make my proposal at this time. I would like to place this film fourth.
So we would be at Goldfinger, From Russia with Love, Dr. No, and then You Only Live Twice, and then Thunderball?
Correct.
Okay.
I'm coming in dead last.
Does Patterson have well, that's just because you're insecure about the whole Asian thing.
I am on the fence.
I'm with Nathan. I'm on
the fence with putting this dead last, actually.
I'm going to second Patterson.
Okay.
And let's argue that out. Let's argue.
I'll say I'm on the I want to point out I'm on the fence because I'm kind of like I could go both ways.
Okay. I'm also on the fence, but
to be honest,
I'm gonna side with Nance for now.
I'm even gonna say I'm on the fence. Like I could easily see this being placed last. Like, okay, the first thing I want to address when I'm going to talk about this film is fucking King Kong bananas compared to the previous ones.
Yeah,
it's got a helicopter fight. It's got ninjas.
Ninjas? The art of concealment and surprise, one son.
It's got Sean Connery pretending to be an Asian man on multiple occasions.
More helicopters, more ninjas.
More helicopters, more ninjas, more shutters.
More shutters.
Lots of shutters.
Open shutters.
Close the shutters.
Open shutters.
Shutters.
Close shutters.
Close the shutters.
My initial impression comparing it to Thunderball is that, as we talked about extensively last week, Thunderball has so many story shortcomings, and there's so much embarrassing shit in this movie.
Though.
Like cut to the volcano with the shitty optical shot of the lava flow. I laugh my ass off, but those things will never deter me from. I'll never be like, well, this movie's not as good because it has worse special effects. Story will always be king for me. And I think that this is without a doubt better than Thunderball on story alone.
And that's kind of where I was at. Why I placed it at fourth. I would agree with you, Charlie. Like I think the story's a little better than Thunderball, which is why I'm going to put it there.
Even Bad Guy alone, like I think Blofeld has his own shortcomings. Yeah. But he's almost automatically better than Largo. I think Largo is just trash. I think Largo, with a couple of rewrites, Largo could have been cool, but he just sucks. He sucks
for sure.
Where I'm on the fence is that I feel like a lot of shit feels phoned in, and a lot like unlike Thunderball, I feel like they went all out and everybody was on board. As much as the story, which is mostly in the beginning, doesn't track. I think Thunderball had better direction. It had better, it definitely had better characters, where this movie has weaker characters, and I think the direction's not as good. And mainly, it's just those little things that you notice. A lot of shit just feels phoned in. I mean, even Donald Pleasance's presence in the film is not that great. I like Donald Pleasance, but like the fact that they bring him in, and you even mentioned it, where he's just like, kill Bond. It's super hammy. It's super comic booky. There's a reason why Austin Powers, why Mike Myers used this movie as probably the main template for that film. They spent way too much time on the fucking Japanese wedding.
Movies like this back in the day had this whole thing of, you don't have Google, right? You can't just Google Japan and see Japan. You can't watch YouTube videos about Japan. So we're going to take you to a far off place, and this adventure is going to be in this unknown world. And that's why they spend a lot of time on the wedding sequence, the wedding sequence and all that.
Yeah. I get what you're saying, Charlie. Like the script and the story, I think are better, but I think the direction in this movie is just not as good. And I think it like falls more onto the second unit when you have all these really great stunts. And yeah, I could go on and on about like, I think this movie's great when it comes to the action in this film. But I mean, the rest of the direction of the film, I'm like, it's all right. No, I just don't think it's as good as the other ones.
They do that thing that we talked about where Blofeld says,
do you know what gun this is?
What a PPK.
Only one person we know uses this sort of gun. James Bond.
There's only one man on the planet.
Yeah. Right. Yes. Yes.
Who uses a Walther PPK 7.65 millimeter. And
which is ridiculous because it's like anyone who knows anything about firearms is like every single firearm ever is mass manufactured.
When we talked about Dr. No, I even said this. He says
the American CIA swear by them,
which would mean that they also use them as well, and that all the 00 agents use them. So it's a very strange, like I get as a story point, if Ronald Dahl's writing is like, oh, this sounds real cool. He's like, he's the only guy who uses his gun, but it's like, it's not. The Bond franchise from this point on, like I said before, like the Casino Royale parody film had already come out by this point, right? So the franchise as a whole, the whole super spy bubble, if you will, like right now we're in a superhero franchise bubble. That whole thing pops after this film, like kind of after this film. And so every movie after this is what's new, what's in, and they're going to use that to like market these movies. This film, I'm like surprised, and I thought about it. I'm like, oh wait, yeah, they're doing that with this film with the space race, which was big at that point. Because I mean, it wasn't until like 69's only in 2 years or 3 years when they make this film, and that's when we first land on the moon. So it's kind of a big deal at this point. But I do think like it's kind of weird going from nuclear weapons from the last movie that could actually kill people to just trying to incite a war over people going to space, and the technology at that point isn't even that grand.
Well, yeah,
but it's still nuclear war.
That would have been mutually assured destruction.
Over spaceships?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it was the space race.
I just think that's just a little far-fetched.
Race to control space.
Any interference with this spaceship will be regarded as an act of war.
May I ask what motive our Russian friends would have for wishing to destroy American spacecraft?
My government sees this as nothing less than a blatant attempt to gain complete and absolute control of space itself for military purposes.
Well, that's the Cold War.
I'm with Nance. Like what we're forgetting here is the cultural context. Like this space race was a surrogate for armed conflict.
Yeah. But during this point, I mean, America and even America and Russia were still. I mean, you had like the Gemini mission. You had the Gemini missions where they were trying to like latch on to different spacecrafts from both spacecrafts.
It doesn't matter.
I mean?
Like embarrassment
it just
in the
seems very
space
odd.
race is fatal.
Yeah, that was
a
the
fatal
whole
mistake to do. Like Nance is right.
They set it up perfectly in the opening. In the opening, they're saying we think the Russians did this for supremacy over space for military reasons. Because you sent a rocket to the moon. That's great for mankind. Yeah. That it's not about benefiting mankind. It's about my country dominating this new frontier before your country does.
100%.
Post-Cold War, those tensions carried over into continued competition into the space race. Who's going to dominate space first? Who's going to take that? And they made a point early in the film. They made a point that this is the Soviets trying to control space for military purposes.
Yeah.
That's what each one of them viewed it as, is who's going to take over space for that purpose.
Literally everything I just said.
To make it contemporary.
Better space.
More space.
Better rockets.
I don't think you
rockets
said
that don't even fucking exist. You know what's really funny about this movie is that they have a rocket in this film that we only just recently got the technology to, and that's a rocket that flies up into space and lands
comes
back
down like this. Yeah,
exactly.
Comes down like that.
Did you know Elon was inspired by this film?
I wouldn't be surprised.
And multiple Bond films, actually.
By the way, that giant volcano set, which was designed by Ken Adams, that whole set cost $1 million.
AKA the budget of Dr. No.
Exactly.
Jesus Christ.
Exactly. He goes to Saltzman and Broccoli and he's like, hey.
Sorry, old buddy, but a mill is a hell of a chunk of dough.